The House will come to order. The Pledge of Allegiance this morning. The Pledge of Allegiance this morning will be led by Chaz Bruce from the Denver School for Science and Technology, who was recently accepted to the Air Force Academy.
If you would please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Kohler, please take the roll.
Representatives Becker, Buck, Buckner, Conti. Representative Conti.
Absent.
Absent. Corum. Court. Del Grosso.
Absent.
Absent. Dorr. Duran. Everett. Representative Everett.
Absent.
Absent. Exum. Fields. Fisher. Foote. Garcia. Gardner. Representative Gardner. Oh. I don't think. Oh, it is. Present. Giroux. Janal. Yeah, sorry. Hamner. Holbert. Hollinghorst. Humphrey. Joshi. Kagan. Kraftharp. Labuda. Oh, she's running late. Excused. Landgraf. Present. Lawrence. Lebsock. Lee. May. McCann. Representative McCann.
Yeah. They're not done yet, are they?
Absent. McLaughlin. McNulty. Melton. Mitch Bush. Moreno. Excused. Murray. Navarro. Nordberg. Pabon. Representative Conti is present. Representative Pabon. Pabon. Oh, yep. Peniston. Pedersen. Primavera. Priola. Rankin. Rosenthal. Representative Del Grosso is present. Representative Rosenthal. Ryden. Sane. Representative Sane. Absent. Salazar. Schaefer. Representative Schaefer. Present. Scott. Singer. Sonnenberg. Stevens. Representative Sane is present. Representative Everett is present. Swam. Representative Swam. Absent. Zabo. Tyler. Excused. Vigil. Waller. Williams. Wilson. Wright. Young. Speaker Ferrandino.
Good morning, Corey. What are we at? Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
I know, sir.
Did you give me? I didn't hear you call my name.
Thank you.
I was over.
Swam is the only absent. We got 62, 2, 1. Excuse me. Okay, 62 and 3.
With 62 members present, 3 excused, a quorum is present. Representative Sane. No, I saw her. I know, she was just here. Representative Kagan, would you like to do the journal?
Mr. Speaker, I move that we dispense with the reading of the previous day's journal and accept that it was properly recorded.
As corrected by the Chief Clerk.
As corrected by the Chief Clerk.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Motion is adopted. Members, we are going to take a brief recess and wait for the Senate to come so we can do the memorial to Ken Gordon. As we are waiting, we will hear some music from John Hubert and Beryl Fanslaw while we are in recess and waiting for the Senate. So don't go very far. It won't be, it'll be a few minutes before the Senate joins us. The House will stand in recess.
Here Comes the Sun, Beatles.
Marilyn, have Cindy call when they're headed over.
Okay, let me know.
Is Tyler not coming in?
I heard he was just running.
One of the staff members is asking.
Okay.
Is that now? You want to go now?
Thank you.
Hey, Corey.
Yes.
Hi, I'm here.
So is this a joint deal with the Senate?
Just to go right now?
Marilyn.
Here comes the sun, doo-doo-doo-doo. Here comes the sun, and I say it's alright. Little darling, it's been a long, cold, lonely winter. Little darling, it feels like years since it's been here. Here comes the sun, doo-doo-doo. Here comes the sun, and I say it's alright. Little darling, the smiles returning to the faces. Little darling, it seems like years since it's been here. Here comes the sun, doo-doo-doo. Here comes the sun, and I say, it's alright. Sun, 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 here it comes. Sun, 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 here it comes. Sun, 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 here it comes.
Okay, good. I'm waiting for my cue.
Sun, 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 here it comes. Little darling, I feel that ice is slowly melting. Little darling, it seems like years since it's been clear. Here comes the sun, doo-doo-doo. Here comes the sun, and I say, it's alright. It's alright.
When I see the president, we'll start. Do we have a message? Just want to see the president, then we'll start. We'll read. Is the majority leader? Repeat it, majority leader. I need Vicky Lee. For a redhead. 5 minute tall redhead.
President Singer?
No, one with hair.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. Thank you.
Once I see Morgan, we have to read a message from the Senate, introduction of resolutions, memorials, and then we'll start. It's all redhead. That's what I say all the time. I see most of the Senate. Let's start.
Wait, back.
Because I can give members at least to sit in their seats and stuff.
Not the one facing us.
Okay. Most of them are here, so we're going to get started. Corey? The House will come to order. Members, guests, please take your seats. Message from the Senate.
Mr. Speaker, the Senate has
Remainder of
adopted.
the message from the Senate will be printed in the journal. Introduction of resolutions, or memorials, sorry.
Senate Joint Memorial 1 by Senator Stedman, also Representative Court, memorializing former Senator Ken Gordon.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the House suspend the rules for immediate consideration of Senate Joint Memorial 001.
Seeing no objection, the House will suspend the rules for immediate consideration as SJM 1. Mr. Kohler, please read the title to Senate Joint Memorial 1.
Senate Joint Memorial 1 by Senator Stedman, also Representative Court, memorializing former Senator Ken Gordon.
Representative Court.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May we go out of order to have the first comments made by Senator Stedman?
Can you please move the memorial, and I assume you want it read at length?
Yes, thank you. I got myself out of order. Thank you, yes. Mr. Kohler, please read.
Well, can you move it?
Yes.
Representative Court.
I'm sorry, I'm a little flustered. I move Senate Joint Memorial 001 and ask that it be read at length. Thank you.
Whereas our respected former colleague, Ken Gordon, a past member of the Colorado Senate and House of Representatives, departed this life on December 22, 2013, at the age of 63. And whereas Senator Gordon was born February 6, 1950, in Detroit, Michigan, to Harold and Marion Gordon. And whereas Senator Gordon attended the University of Michigan, where he earned a degree in economics and political science and was president of Tau Delta Phi fraternity, and then earned his law degree at Boston University School of Law. And whereas Senator Gordon worked as a public defender before starting his own law practice. And whereas Denver Westward named Senator Gordon its Pro Bono Attorney of the Year in 1988 in recognition of his legal work for the less fortunate. And whereas Senator Gordon taught political science and constitutional law at the University of Colorado at Denver as an adjunct professor for several years before running for the Colorado House of Representatives in 1992. And whereas Senator Gordon was elected to the Colorado House of Representatives in 1992 and served as a state representative from 1993 to 2000 before being elected to the Senate, where he served from 2001 to 2008, representing the people of Denver and Arapahoe counties in House District 9 and Senate District 35, respectively. And whereas Senator Gordon served on the House Committees for Agriculture, Livestock, and Natural Resources, State Veterans and Military Affairs, and Appropriations, and served on the Senate Committees for Judiciary, Agriculture and Natural Resources, Education, and Senate Services. And whereas Senator Gordon also served on the Executive Committee of the Legislative Council and the Committee on Legal Services. And whereas Senator Gordon was the House Assistant Minority Leader from 1997 to 1998, House Minority Leader from 1999 to 2000, Senate Assistant Minority Leader from 2003 to 2004, and Senate Majority Leader from 2005 to 2008. And whereas while serving as a member of the General Assembly, Senator Gordon passed legislation regarding criminal justice reform, election law reform, environmental protection and conservation, and assisting persons with disabilities and autism. And whereas during his time in the General Assembly, Senator Gordon is remembered for his bipartisan efforts, including the suggestion that Republican members be allowed to serve as vice chairs on Democrat-controlled Senate committees. And whereas Senator Gordon possessed a mastery of the legislative rules and had tremendous respect for the rules and the integrity of the legislative process. And whereas Senator Gordon once wrote, "If we abuse the rules in order to prevent the minority party members from accomplishing anything that reflects the values of their constituents, then we create a deep and bitter resentment. This resentment will come back to haunt us in myriad ways. Abuse of the rules does not show strength, it shows weakness." And whereas, out of deep and abiding concern for the credibility of the legislative and executive branches of Colorado government, Senator Gordon was a relentless advocate for eliminating the excessive influence of special interests in campaigns and the legislative process. And whereas Senator Gordon worked hard for issues he believed in, such as organizing a 350-mile walk across Colorado in 2005 to rally support for Referendum C, which called for a temporary suspension of certain taxpayers' Bill of Rights provisions. And whereas always a dedicated public servant, Senator Gordon also ran for Secretary of State in the 2006 election. And whereas, to give constituents and the people of Colorado confidence that he was accountable to no one but his constituents and his own moral compass, in each of his 8 campaigns for public office, Senator Gordon rejected all campaign contributions from political action committees and only accepted campaign contributions from individual people. And whereas, after his tenure in the state legislature, Senator Gordon founded the nonprofit organization Clean Slate Now to encourage political candidates to refuse special interest money. And whereas Senator Gordon is remembered as a dedicated public servant who championed democracy and good government. And whereas it is fitting that we, the members of the 69th General Assembly, pay tribute to the dedicated service of Senator Ken Gordon and express our deep regret and sorrow occasioned by his death. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Senate of the 69th General Assembly of the State of Colorado, the House of Representatives concurring herein, that in the death of Ken Gordon, the people of the state of Colorado have lost a dedicated public servant and outstanding citizen, and that we, the members of the 69th General Assembly, do hereby extend our deep and heartfelt sympathy to the members of his family and pay tribute to a man who served his state well and faithfully. Be it further resolved that copies of this joint memorial be sent to Senator Gordon's son, Ben Gordon, daughter Wendy Cook, sisters Patty Gordon and Wendy Gordon, and longtime companion Betty Lehman.
Representative Court.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask that we allow a recess so that Senator Stedman may be the first one to speak on this Senate joint memorial.
Members, please be seated, and let me just say how we're going to do this. We're going to have the sponsors speak to the resolution, then we will allow current House members, then we will go into recess to allow current Senate members, and then after the current Senate members are done, we will allow former members to speak. Under the House rules, anyone is allowed to speak for 10 minutes. That will be the same for both when we're in recess and out of recess, so up to 10 minutes. The House will stand in a brief recess. Senator Stedman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, members of the House, for your indulgence in allowing this resolution to be read this morning in your chambers as the Senate honors our former Senate Majority Leader. Very much appreciate your relaxing your rules so that we may do this efficiently and with the fitting decorum that is deserving of this occasion. I'm proud to be a sponsor of this resolution, or this memorial rather, and to honor the memory of a man I knew for many years, Senator Ken Gordon. Senator Gordon was many things to many people. He was a friend, a teacher, a lawyer, an inspiration. He was an ethical man, a principled politician, a progressive champion, and a decent person. He cared deeply about the Colorado General Assembly and its rules and its traditions, and about ensuring that its integrity and legitimacy were preserved against the corrosive influences of money, apathy, and temptation. Now, Senator Gordon could also be a bit of a curmudgeon at times. He could be short. He was sometimes distracted by his smartphone, and he did not suffer fools very well. He did his homework, and he expected the same of those he interacted with in his role as a state legislator. I first met Ken Gordon in 1992. He was campaigning for the State House at the time, and I was campaigning against a ballot initiative. He had many issues that he championed. I, that year, had only one or two. Our paths crossed many times that year, and they crisscrossed over and over again for the remainder of his life. I didn't exactly follow in his footsteps, but I somehow ended up in his seat, his state Senate seat, that is. Now, as you know, Ken won his election in 1992, and he kept winning elections thereafter. He was an amazing campaigner. He loved to knock on doors, and he once walked the length of the state to draw attention to the Referendum C campaign. He served his full 8 years here in the House and then 8 full years after that in the Senate. And during that time, he sponsored and passed numerous pieces of legislation, many of which I'm sure we'll hear about this morning. He also became a master of the rules. He learned to use the rules first as a member of the minority party here in the House, and then as the House Minority Leader, and later as the Senate Majority Leader. All of his 8 years in the House were served in the minority party, and so were 2 of his 8 years in the Senate. And his mastery for the rules and his respect for the institution of the legislature were gained from having looked at the legislature from both sides now. His inherent sense of fairness and integrity were reinforced by his experience in these differing roles, majority party, minority party. I will always remember the disappointment and the outrage Senator Gordon felt at the so-called midnight gerrymander in 2003. This episode infuriated him and taught him important lessons that he demonstrated throughout his tenure as Senate Majority Leader, a role he took on after the very next general election. He often told the story of how he inquired about rumors that a redistricting bill would be introduced in the last 3 days of the legislative session, and how he was told that whatever happened would comply with the rules of the Senate. When the bill was introduced on Monday and rammed through in the 3 days, the last 3 days of session by suspending certain provisions of the Senate rules, he confronted the Senate president about complying with the rules, and he was told, quote, "The Senate rules contain a provision for suspending the Senate rules." Or at least that's how Ken Gordon told the story. And he told this story often, not to chide or shame the senators involved in that fateful episode from our not-too-distant history, but rather he told the story to illustrate a broader, more important point. Abuse of the rules does not show strength, it shows weakness. Ken Gordon was a brutally honest man. He'd tell you so. He didn't believe in trickery or subterfuge. If he was with you, he was with you. And if he wasn't, he told you so. He respected the rules, and he adhered to the rules, sometimes to the frustration of his caucus or his colleagues. He used the rules to his advantage, and he'd let you know how he was going to do it. But he wouldn't misuse the rules or disrespect the process or his adversaries. He had too much respect for both. I'm not going to detail Senator Gordon's accomplishments during his tenure in the legislature. In the text of the joint memorial, we listed some of the broad topics that he addressed in the bills that he sponsored and the laws he helped pass. But what's clear from his body of work is that Ken Gordon cared about Colorado. He cared about the people, he cared about the government, he cared about our environment. I should also add that he cared about justice, civil liberties, due process, fairness, and the rule of law. He believed very much in what we do here under this gold dome and how it impacted the lives of everyone in our state. In 2006, Ken ran an unsuccessful campaign for Secretary of State, motivated in part because he would have been damn good at it, but mostly because of his passionate belief that the greatest threat to our democracy is the process by which we elect our leaders in expensive, divisive campaigns fueled by special interest money and often designed not to lift up one candidate or their ideals, but rather to tear others down. He founded the organization Clean Slate Now to promote his belief that we should reject the corrupting influence of big money in politics. Now, Ken liked to tell stories. He liked to tell stories to illustrate his points, especially in his written communications. Many of you were probably on his email list and can appreciate what I'm saying. Often his points weren't revealed until after a lengthy story, or at least lengthy for being an email missive. Sometimes the stories were funny or sad, and sometimes the moral of the story wasn't always immediately clear. But this was his way of engaging his audience and making them feel the point he wanted to make. I'm sure many of you remember fondly his emails and his stories, because I know I'm not the only one here that was on his email list. Many of you were on it too. It's my hope today, by telling stories about Ken Gordon, we not only honor his memory and his service to the people of Colorado, but that we also learn from his example. The story of Ken Gordon's respect for the rules and the integrity of the process is told not to make you impressed by who he was, but rather to make you inspired to be the ethical, principled, and fair role model that he rightly should be for all of those who are seated in either of our chambers. It's an honor to follow in his footsteps and to honor the man that Ken Gordon was. And I thank you all very much for your attention this morning and for listening to my Ken Gordon stories. I look forward to hearing your Ken Gordon stories. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you, Senator Stedman. The House will come back to order. Representative Court.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, Ken Gordon's stories. Thank you, Senator Stedman. I knew Ken, as Senator Stedman did, for many years before I decided to run for a seat that, before the lines were redrawn, he had represented. So I knew that I needed to go and talk with him to ask for his support for my campaign. Well, all of you know what I think is the most important issue in Colorado, our Constitution. So I went to meet with Ken, all loaded up to tell him how important the mess in our Constitution is. And we sat down, and I started in about the Constitution, and everything that I had to say about the Constitution. And Ken very politely listened to me, and then he looked at me and he said, "Lois, that's not the most important issue." I said, "It's not? How can you say that?" He said, "The most important issue is the corrosive, pernicious influence of money in politics." And I said, "Yes, but to get back to the Constitution." And he said, "That's an important issue, but," well, I won't bore you with the hour-and-a-half long conversation where he told me what was most important and I told him what was most important. Needless to say, by the end of the conversation, guess who won? Ken won. And I then took what many of us have learned to call the Ken Gordon Pledge. I will not accept PAC money. So I said, okay, that's the way I'll proceed. Frankly, colleagues and former members and public and family, I wasn't so sure about that. I didn't know in my gut, like Ken knew, that that was the most important issue at the time. But I thought, okay, I'll run with it. So I went out on the campaign trail, and I started incorporating into my speeches, oh, and by the way, I don't take PAC money. And I started saying at the door, by the way, I don't take PAC money. I was shocked by the response in East Denver when I said those words. So that's when I learned something that Ken Gordon taught me without intending to teach me per se, and that is that leadership goes both ways. To be a good representative, we have to listen clearly, actually pay attention to what our constituents tell us matters to them. But we also need to tell them passionately what we know matters. And as I went door to door and talked with people and gave speeches, I found out how passionately Ken had represented the people of his district about what mattered to them and about what mattered to him. I understood that good representation is not just coming here and working on all the bills we work on and all the issues we work on, but good representation is helping people understand how we function, what matters at the core of our government. As Senator Stedman said, Ken cared about public service more than anything. He cared about good representation. Now, I know there's a lot of people that are going to tell us a lot of wonderful stories about Ken, and believe it or not, I'm going to finish. I know you can't believe I'm going to stop talking, but I'm going to. I'm going to end by saying, Ken was my friend. I'm going to get through this. He was my mentor, but the highest honor I can give Ken is to tell you that he is the kind of representative, he was the kind of representative that I and all of us should aspire to be. Thank you.
Representative Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 1 Thessalonians 5:12 says, "We urge you, recognize those who labor among you, who are over you in the Lord, and who admonish you, and to esteem them very highly in love for their work's sake." Ken Gordon was a worthy political adversary, but he was also someone who I can esteem highly in love for his work's sake. because he provided admonishment. Admonishment is not scolding or reprimand, but encouragement to be better. That's the way I define it. Senator Gordon was elected in 1992, which I believe was the year that Colorado led the nation in adopting term limits. He's one of those few rare examples of a legislator who gets to come to one chamber and serve now a full 8 years and then serve a full 8 years in the other chamber. Senator Gordon provides an example of why term limits are weak and possibly wrong. Senator Gordon provides an example of how we lose institutional memory. How many of you here had the opportunity to serve with Ken Gordon? I didn't serve with him, but I did work in the Capitol, and the stories that Senator Stedman shared are true. Both in the minority and the majority, Senator Gordon was one who embraced the rules. I can remember that little twinkle in his eye standing outside looking into these eyes and saying, I don't agree with you, but do that. Use those rules. Use that opportunity to your advantage. Because Senator Stedman is right. Senator Gordon is right. Abuse of the rules is not strength, it is weakness. And that's one of the things that I came to appreciate about Senator Stedman is that he was not afraid of the rules. He was not afraid to teach people about the rules, the process. Senator Gordon was truly a worthy political adversary. I can remember very few times that when working here, I would have agreed with him. But Senator Gordon is one of those who I came to respect because he was a leader. He did embrace those rules, and he encouraged people on both sides of the aisle and both sides of the glass to treat each other with respect and to use the rules to get the outcome that you're after, or to at least try. I think that's one thing that we can learn from here, those of us who are subject to those term limits. I think Senator Gordon provides an example of a person who fought for himself when it was right to do so and stood with his caucus when it was right to do so. One thing that I would encourage all of the members of both chambers is to look for those opportunities when thinking for yourself and stepping outside of the comfort zone of the caucus might be the right thing to do, because Senator Gordon certainly provided that example. Thank you so much for bringing the resolution, Representative Court and Senator Stedman. It's one opportunity when we on the other side of the aisle, at least this member of the other side of the aisle, can stand in agreement and appreciation for both the resolution and the hard 16 years of work that Senator Ken Gordon put into this chamber and that other one across the way. Thank you.
Representative Melton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I rise in support of House or Senate Joint Memorial 001. Senator Gordon, when I first got into politics, I always heard of him as being this crazy guy out there that was trying to get money out of politics. And he was always kind of like this guy that, you wanted to avoid because you didn't know. I mean, he was going to get in your face, and he was going to try to convince you that he was right. And so I heard of him years before I actually met him. But when I did meet him, it was at some event. He was off, tucked into the corner, as I've learned that he tends to do. And he pulled me into the corner and started berating me, not about money, but just about what it was why I was running for office, what it was that I wanted to do when I got here. And after that day, I started to call him a friend. And I would accept phone calls from him every once in a while. And then before I knew it, I actually had a self-imposed mentor because I started getting advice and I started getting unsolicited criticisms and then an awkward word of encouragement right before he hung up. And later on, after weeks and weeks and weeks of debate in terms of special interest money, I joined with Representative Court in becoming one of those clean slate candidates. But even when I talked to him on the phone, he didn't berate me with that. It was always more, how are you doing on the campaign? What kind of bills are you running? After the election and once I got here, have you talked to your committee members? Have you counted your votes? Have you done this? Have you done that? And again, hang up the phone with an awkward, all right, good job. And, and real quickly get off the phone. But he was my friend. And even though we didn't always agree, I think that's what we respected about each other. Was that we could have these conversations and he'd tell me something I didn't want to hear and I'd tell him I don't want to hear that and he'd be like, fine, well, I'm right anyway. And we would move on to the next subject. And what I learned was after hearing about him early on, that he was this crazy guy out there, what I actually discovered was he was a passionate guy. He was a guy who really believed in this body and in the Senate and everything that we can do for this state. He believed that no matter what idea it was, no matter how crazy it was, no matter how far-fetched it was, if it was good policy, it was worth a try. And even if you didn't get all the way there, if you could make some steps towards that goal, then you did something. Just before he passed away, we were actually supposed to have a meeting, and it was right during the holidays, and we were getting ready to come back to the legislative body, and he had some bill ideas, and I told him, I think they're a little out there, but let's meet and talk about them. And he said, no, he's like, I know you think that they're out there. I know you think that they may be much to do. But again, if it's good policy and if it's something that you believe in, lean in and try it. And if you do it, great. And if you don't, at least you tried. At least you can say that you are walking away with no regrets. And so ever since that conversation, I've really taken those words to heart. And I hope that every member in here does. I hope that you lean in, and I hope that you all continue to serve the best way that you can and stand up for the policies that you believe in. And I miss my friend very much, and I just want him to know that I'm listening still, even though I may not always agree. Thank you.
Representative Singer and Sane.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's an honor serving with you.
With you as well.
Members, there are those that make us better for having paused to remember them. And Ken Gordon is one of those people. He was a servant of the people that reminded us that sometimes the best tool of a leader is having deep reservoirs of humility, patience, and humor. And that sometimes stories are the only way to reach a hardened heart. The stories of Ken's life remind us that the breadth of dedication and the length of one's reach is limited only by the passion one chooses to apply to their cause. My very first town hall as a state legislator featured Ken Gordon. So in a way, Ken gave me a very auspicious start in the art of working on a divisive issue in a collaborative fashion, because that first town hall was a gun debate with my esteemed colleague, Representative Singer. It was, as a freshman legislator, to have a huge honor to have luminaries like Senator Ken Gordon, John Head, Weld County District Attorney Ken Buck, and author John Lott Jr. at that debate. And that is a debate that was respectful, it was spirited, and it made us all better for having the discussion. And so, Ken, I'm still listening, even if we don't agree.
Representative Singer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Sane. When people say that you need to walk the walk for your constituents or for the issues you believe in, I mean, he literally walked the walk, and that was my first knowledge and experience of Senator and Representative Ken Gordon, was when he literally walked across the state of Colorado to make sure that his issues were heard across the state, because they were the state's issues. They were education and health care and higher education, and even a little bit on roads and bridges, mostly because he was walking across 350 miles of them. But my first real interaction with him after I ran for office and respectfully told him about disagreeing with his no-pack pledge, he still wanted to engage with me. And if you remember about this time last year, we had a pretty lengthy debate on the House floor about certain gun safety issues, and I didn't get home till probably about 11 or 12 at night. And then Representative Sain and I were to hold a town hall meeting on those very same issues back here in Denver at about 10 o'clock in the morning. And Senator Gordon was little crinklier than normal, but he did his thing, and you had Ken Gordon and Ken Buck, John Head and John Lott, Ken and Ken, John and John squaring off, and two Singer and Sain, two S's from the House doing their thing. And I walked away from that debate, I think, a little bit more knowledgeable about the issue. But after I got home, I soon heard that he actually had suffered a death in his family late that night. And so as I was kind of complaining about my day and the length of my day, I mean, he didn't bring it up the whole time. He stuck to the issues because he knew that that's what was driving this, and that the passion and the issues needed to be respected, and that the passion and the issues needed to be adhered to. He didn't use these things as a crutch. He stood up for what he believed in, and he did it in a way that brought both sides together, at least to have that respectful conversation. And so that's what I'll remember. And the last thing that I'll leave you with is behind my desk, I have a shelf, and usually constituents will send me things, and I'll keep it there to remind me. I also have only one picture of one former legislator, and that is Ken Gordon, and he's sitting behind my shoulder every time that I'm at my desk. He's looking over my shoulder every time I'm lobbied, every time I'm meeting with a constituent. He is there. And I'll say this thing that will probably rankle his face even a little more, but God bless you, Ken Gordon, for all you did for this state, and your works will be remembered far beyond my time here and far beyond any of our times here, and I'm grateful for that. Thank you.
Representative Kraft-Hart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, members. So I didn't know Senator Gordon as a colleague because he didn't wait for me. He didn't wait for me to come as a legislator. I knew him when I was on the other side of the glass as a lobbyist. I knew him when I would come and talk with him about different bills around mental health. But I really got to know him when I was a fellow with Betty Lehman with the Bighorn Institute. We did the healthcare fellowship. And Betty and I and a couple others were in a team. And part of what we did is we developed legislation and worked with a legislator on that legislation, and then brought it here. And Ken Gordon was our legislator. So through that time, we brought a bill around express eligibility. And through that time, we would sit in Ken's office, and he would share with us the wisdom about strategy and the wisdom about politics. It was always pretty fascinating. I think I always want to remember Ken as Senator Gordon as the strong advocate for persons with disabilities, the strong advocate for persons with autism, and that his memory and who he is will live on here in Colorado through the good works that he did for persons with disabilities and persons with autism. Rest in peace, Ken Gordon.
Representative Rosenthal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, as you may know, during the time that Ken was a member of the Senate, I was his constituent. So I had a number of interactions with him. I worked on his campaigns. I heard him speak dozens and dozens of times, and had the opportunity to ask for his advice a few times, similar to Representative Melton. One of those occasions was in 2002, when I was running for Denver City Council. And I wanted to know his thoughts on a type of literature piece that I was going to design. Maybe I should have one of those, those kind of small cards that would have, a big picture of me and some bullet points about my ideas and about my bio and, a little bit about, a couple things in the neighborhood. And he thought about it, and he said in his usual blunt style, "Paul, don't treat the voters like they're stupid. Talk about the issues. Get into detail." He then showed me his literature piece, which was this huge newspaper-sized folded thing. I mean, it was big. It was like this size and then folded in.